Hey, how's it going everyone? Among the most popular shonen, one thing that is almost as synonymous with protagonists as freaky hair, angry power-ups, and badass entrances is the concept of a signature move. Goku has the Kamehameha, Naruto has the Rasengan, Luffy has these hands, and Ichigo has Getsuga Tensho. If you've been following me for a while, joining my live streams, you'd quickly realize that I'm not the biggest fan of Bleach. As I've been reading through the manga for the past few months, I've developed a lot of issues with the story, the way the characters are written/treated, and its overall execution. But I don't want to harp on all that stuff just yet. That is a different topic of conversation for a later video, once I finish reading through the Thousand Year Blood War. For now, I simply want to focus on a move that in all honesty is almost the perfect metaphor for my thoughts on Bleach as a whole. All flash and no substance. Getsuga Tensho, by all intents and purposes, feels like an attack that came out in the mid to late 2000s. To be clear, that's not a bad thing. It's a massive wave of energy emanating from Ichigo's blade that basically says, "F*** everything" in that direction. The name is badass, whether it's the Japanese or English translation. It looks impressive since it comes out as a giant crescent moon slash, but most importantly, it's fun to say, so when you really break it down, what exactly is the issue? Well, when thinking about what Getsuga Tensho is and what it tries to achieve, you quickly realize that in terms of execution, this move becomes kinda, sort of, useless as the series progresses. Yes, you heard me correctly, but it's not enough for me to tell you, so with all that out of the way, let's begin. The Getsuga Tensho can technically be traced all the way back to chapter 67 when Ichigo unlocks his Shikai for the first time. It wasn't an ability that he could necessarily use at will. Only when his back is against the wall and his resolve reaches the point where he has to kill is he capable of unleashing an attack that is, at least by this point in the story, an incomplete version of Getsuga. The first time he uses the named version of Getsuga Tensho doesn't occur until chapter 161, where he fights Byakuya and we get to see what it's really capable of since it's the first time Captain Kuchiki takes any sort of damage. I'm sure at this point you're probably wondering,
Eon, Getsuga Tensho is already meeting every expectation for what a signature move should do. I mean, you just said it yourself, he hurt Byakuya and we all know how powerful he is.
and to an extent that's true, but this is the first time we really get to see what this move is all about. Ichigo describes Getsuga as an attack that consumes spirit energy and fires a super high concentration of spiritual pressure from the tip of the blade that is magnified and discharged. In other words, it's a massive wave of spirit energy that says, "F*** everything" in that direction. Right after asking Byakuya to use his Bankai, Ichigo goes for another one and the move is literally eaten up by Senbon Sakura Kageyoshi. The next time he uses it in this fight is after he uses Bankai for the first time and subsequently has his body taken over momentarily by his inner hollow. Byakuya takes 2 hits from a pincer attack and when Ichigo regains control, they go for one final clash and I will admit at this point, Ichigo did win their fight. Granted, it wasn't because he used Getsuga Tensho to put down Byakuya, more so because Byakuya decided to give up. The next time he uses it, he catches Grimmjow by surprise, since Grimmjow claims that his move wasn't in Ulquiorra's report, and I will admit that he did leave him with a scar. That being said, all it really resulted in was Grimmjow finally seeing Ichigo as somebody worth killing. The only reason Ichigo survives this encounter is because Tozen shows up to bring Grimmjow back. He does get a salty run back with a weaker Grimmjow that does make the move look impressive since he only landed 3 hits back to back that left Grimmjow covered in blood. Following the introduction of the Hueco Mundo arc, he uses it against a Sand Hollow which ends up having no effect on it, and it's eventually defeated by being frozen with Rukia's Shikai. He uses it again against a Privaron Espada Dordoni who kicks it away. He attempts a second Getsuga Tensho which is also blown away, and by the time he decides to lock in and hollowfy, he seemingly one-shots Dordoni with a slash that seems to be a Getsuga Tensho at least by the anime. At this point, Getsuga Tensho has about a 61% success rate when it comes to damaging his opponents and a 15% success rate in regards to actually defeating an opponent. Trust me when I say, these values are going to drop. He ends up running into Ulquiorra and uses a full power Getsuga that Ulquiorra swats away with one hand and needs to use both hands in order to block a follow-up holified Getsuga that's at least 10 times more powerful. He proceeds to tell Ichigo, "Is that all you've got?" which leaves the boy dumbfounded and then puts him down like a Yonko fighting an admiral. By the way, get ready to see this face a lot, cause Ichigo is healed and gets his third round salty run back with Grimmjow. Mid-fight, Grimmjow fires a Sero at Ichigo who tries to cancel it out with a Getsuga only for it to get immediately overpowered. One zesty transformation later, and he hits Grimmjow with a holified Getsuga only for it to do absolutely nothing and for him to laugh it off. He doesn't really use the move again and ends up defeating Grimmjow not with a Getsuga, but with a regular slash through the chest, which is going to be a consistent theme from here on out. Another salty runback with the fanbase's favorite emo, Ulquiorra, results in 2 Getsuga Tenshos that get deflected. Same song and dance, Ichigo holifies and uses another Getsuga that is dodged by Ulquiorra, who then uses Resurrección and blitzes Ichigo with an attack that he has to block with Getsuga in order to survive. He attempts to unleash a full power Getsuga, which gets casually blocked by Ulquiorra's wing. That's the last Getsuga that we get to see in this fight, so let's move on to his quick encounter with Yami, where his first Getsuga does seemingly no damage, and even after holifying, the best his attack can do is nick Yami's neck, which I'm not gonna count because this amounted to nothing. He doesn't perform another Getsuga until he tries to off-guard Aizen, but it amounts to nothing because of Aizen's Kido. At this point, I sound like a broken record, but he holifies and uses Getsuga Tensho again just for it to do nothing. In this case, it's because Aizen blitzed him. He fights Gin Ichimaru, uses another Getsuga Tensho, and this time it makes Gin bleed, although it's kind of crazy to think that at this point in the story, the best he can do is draw a bit of blood. I will be counting this one. I also want to point out that Ichigo's dad also used the Getsuga Tensho against Aizen, which some would say it did do damage, but in all honesty that's armor, and it genuinely amounted to nothing, so I'm not counting it. After deciding to go train in the Hypibola Ryan chamber, Ichigo shows up to finish Aizen's egotistical power trip. He doesn't really resort to using the normal version of this dog water move until the final Getsuga Tensho. Now let me be clear. This moment right here is badass. But for all the spectacle that came from saying that he becomes Getsuga, all this move really did was weaken Aizen enough for Kisuke's special Kido to take effect. Now, I'm sure some would say that this right here is an example of the move being useful, but I completely disagree. On the one hand, he did weaken Aizen with it so that Uraharu's Kido can work, but on the other hand, it didn't actually defeat Aizen. Between his immortality, regeneration, the special Kido, and the fact that Ichigo implies Aizen wanted to lose his powers because he was lonely or whatever, it's clear, at least to me, that while the move did manage to damage him in some way, it wasn't the true cause of his defeat. I find this frustrating because up until now we've had more instances of the move failing at this point than it succeeding, and furthermore he had to give up his powers for a move that didn't even defeat the main villain. 17 months after Aizen's defeat, Ichigo tries to regain his powers by becoming a Fullbringer. His substitute Soul Reaper badge remembers his powers, and with it, he was able to release a projectile of varying strength that has a similar sensation to a Getsuga Tensho, which he uses to defeat a grotesque pig doll, and I will count this because I really need to give it some kind of points. The second stage of his training has him fire 6 projectiles at Jackie that do nothing until his Fullbring evolves. It's not until we're near the climax of the Fullbringer arc where we get to see Ichigo fire an actual Getsuga Tensho, which Tsukishima deflects. Ichigo eventually gets his powers back, meaning that his sacrifice in the previous arc amounted to nothing, and he finally releases a Getsuga Tensho that completely wipes out the upper half of a mansion. Ichigo does immediately grab Kugo and throws him into the sky in order to let loose a full power Getsuga, but after transforming, Kugo walks away with 0 injuries. I know that he says if he hadn't absorbed Ichigo's powers then he'd be dead, but the simple fact that he has no signs of visible damage means that the move, once again, did absolutely nothing. As they fight, Ichigo sends another Getsuga at Kugo that does nothing, and Kugo fires one right back, which actually ends up damaging Ichigo, so I will count it. The honest problem here might be Ichigo, but I digress. both use Bankai, and instead of defeating Kugo with a Getsuga Tensho, he simply slashes him in the chest, which at this point has a higher success rate and breaks his sword, ending the fight. For those of you that haven't been keeping track so far, we've seen about 41 total uses of the move. Out of this 41, 13 Getsugas have damaged the opponent in some meaningful way. 26 of them have been completely useless, and in 2 specific cases, he used it to save his own skin and neg-diff a mansion, which currently leaves it at a 31 to 32% success rate and an approximately 63% fail rate. So let's finish this up by talking about the 1000-Year Blood War. Within the context of the anime adaptation, Ichigo uses a Getsuga Tensho that wipes out seemingly 8 hollows, increasing his success rate up by quite a bit. I do think it was a bit overkill to use his Bankai, but I suppose Ichigo needed to pad his numbers a little bit. He uses another Getsuga to take down some random Quincy named Ebern. However, like with every other character, Ichigo's small tint of success is susceptible to Kubo's writing, and we go back to the status quo of Getsuga Tensho doing absolutely nothing when it's both tanked by and later parried by Gilge. He gets captured by Gilge's ability and fails to break it even with a Getsuga Tensho. He continues to complain about Getsuga not being capable of busting him out after using it 5 more times. He uses it against Nazi Jesus, Yuhabaha, just for it to do nothing, and gets his Zanpakuto broken. Ichigo obtains his true Zanpakuto, and finally, after 422 chapters of nothing but Getsuga-ass shit shows, he finally adds a new move to his arsenal, Getsuga Jujisho. It's Getsuga Tensho, but 2 this time. He fights some lady bad guys whose names I didn't bother learning. One of them sends a lightning bolt at him, which he uses a Getsuga to block. He retaliates with a Getsuga Jujisho, and all it amounts to is severing an arm that is literally healed 8 panels later, but I'll count it nonetheless. He finds Yuhabaha, attacks with a Getsuga only for it to do nothing again, and I sit here wondering how much black ink was wasted on a move that does nothing. Ichigo undergoes a transformation that was born from the amalgamation of different races that make up his DNA. He then combines the power of a Gran Rey Zero with a Getsuga Tensho in order to blast Yuhabaha to Kingdom Come, only for it to do, and say it with me, nothing. At this point, I genuinely wonder if Ichigo is genuinely capable of pattern recognition. As we near the final climax, a group of people try to jump Yuhabaha, and Ichigo is put in a favorable position by Aizen, who alley-oops him a free shot at the bad guy, which he uses to unleash a final full power attack in order to win the final battle. Is what I would say if he used any other attack that wasn't Getsuga's shitshow. Yuhabaha comes back immediately, all seems lost, he gets Deus Ex Machina'd, and Ichigo defeats him with his most powerful move, a sword slash to the f***ing chest. I don't know what else to tell you. Getsuga Tensho sucks. It's literally all flash and 0 substance. In a world where people can reject phenomena, use perfect hypnosis, manipulate all forms of water, bring back the souls of those they've killed as a personal army, have power over names, can see all possible futures as if they were grains of sand, and so many more, it's crazy to me that the main protagonist's special ability is just a simple wave of energy that has a 35% success rate. Just to be clear, this value is specifically in regards to dealing damage. In terms of actually defeating opponents, its success rate is about 17 to 18%. And this value is technically inflated by 8 hollows which the anime threw in. If I don't include them, then Ichigo only defeated 3 opponents, those being Byakuya, Dordoni, and Pig Guy, which 2 of them I don't even want to count because in one case Byakuya let him win, and in the other case, the fucking Pig Guy didn't even lose to an actual Getsuga Tensho. But anyway, it's a success rate of 5%. The move literally fails to do anything 59 to 60% of the time, and that value goes up if I remove the 8 hollows. I can't even begin to imagine all of the black ink that was wasted on a move that ultimately does nothing and makes Ichigo look like the dumbest protagonist of the big 3 because he refuses to understand that it doesn't work. Does Getsuga Tensho actually do nothing? Technically, no. But when you have an attack that is this lackluster in comparison to every other busted-ass ability within the verse, and its success rate is literally less than 50%, it makes it less exciting to see in action. I can only imagine Kubo wanted to display the strength of his villains by making a move that did arguably have a strong start seem useless for the moment, but it's like he never got the memo that he should stop doing that. This is why I call it the worst signature move. Every time I hear Ichigo utter those words, I don't get excited. I roll my eyes and wait for the move to do absolutely nothing over 50% of the time, just for Ichigo to look dumbfounded for the 30th time. But that's it for the video. If you'd like to know more about my thoughts on Bleach, please let me know down in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.